All systems go. Clear for liftoff. What's up, everyone? Tyler Tamboline here, aka ToeTagginTambo, and welcome to a new PGA season, maybe a new show for some out there. I'm with my man, Alex Blickle. As always, I'll bring him in here in a minute, but we're going to be breaking down everything from a single entry GPP perspective. If you watched us during NFL, we appreciate the support and you coming back. Make sure to tap that thumbs up, subscribe to the channel on the way in. We'll be back here every Wednesday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern. Different weeks. Obviously, we'll give you a heads up if it's, something's going on, or a major week could be different, if it's in some different time zone, whatever that is, but mostly Wednesdays at 10:30 a.m. Eastern. And we're going to be breaking down all things single entry, like we talked about, but course fit, weather. We're going to have a betting segment at the end. We will, of course, go down the lane and find our leverage lane and what we're doing in single entry for the week. But instead of the tier by tier, we're going to kind of break the tiers out by like mega chalk, secondary chalk, the value chalk. We're talking mostly about, as we always say, we're going to teach you how to play, not who to play. And with Alex here, spoiler alert for those that don't know, pretty damn good golfer in his own right. And he can bring a lot of that knowledge over as well with the course fit. I'm thinking about how the industry might be thinking and then how we can think about it differently. So I think you're going to like this show. If you do, let us know. Put it in the comments below. Alex, excited to be back for PGA, the debut edition of Leverage Lane here on the Ship It Nation YouTube station. What's going on, my friend?
Yeah, this is going to be a really fun show. And we talked about it a little bit even when we were on the NFL show, but like the PGA DFS has grown exponentially over the last few years, which has been awesome for us because we loved PGA DFS before it was cool, right? We were in those original PGA DFS streets. I think it's probably the most fun sweat in all of DFS. And it's one of those things where like the entertainment value to work ratio is spectacular in golf because you get 4 days of sweat. You have 3 days of preparation a week instead of, NFL, you're doing work for 6 days in a row just to get 1 day of the sweat. The PGA is a really, really fun, unique beast in that regard. So we're going to have a blast on the show. And I also love the fact that we're going to do a little bit more props and pick 'em as well with this one. Yeah,
you betcha. I know you got a ton of stuff going on there. We'll talk about that in a little bit, get the marketing out of the way fast. But just funny enough, you said it. We always stick, like you and I talk offline. We prep for this stuff. We care so much. Like I said, we were doing this forever, and I'm excited we can do this show. But from the edutainment perspective, I always tease it. It's kind of funny, but there's actually like 3 sweats in PGA DFS. It's like did anybody late WD? Okay, I'm good on that. Safe, nice. They all made their tee times. Then there's the cut sweat on Friday typically, and then you got hopefully some 6 of 6s, or if you're playing single entry, hopefully you got something that's going to be in play, 5 of 6 some weeks, 6 of 6 and others where you're cheering for the 6 of 6. But if you get it through, now you got something to think about on Sunday. So yeah, it's definitely a fun sport. And like Alex said, if you've played NFL DFS or you played other sports, the nice thing about this one is it's really good crossover. It's a different game. That's what we're going to try and help teach you. But the main thing is it's like you can prep on Monday night, pricing's out. Tuesday night, you can work on it. Wednesday night, you can finalize. Thursday morning, you might even be able to tinker away if you want, and then you're good to roll. But you don't have to be away from your family, grinding it out, doing different stuff. I mean, someone said they rearranged their court schedule to be here today, in here. So interesting enough, you guys, we really appreciate you, but just want to note that. If you don't know, just want to mention this quickly off topic so we'll get the marketing out fast, but you can sign up for as little as $2.99 over at Ship It Nation without the optimizer. But the best deal is $3.49. That ends today. That is the last day to get in on the early bird. We've had it out for a couple weeks now. And yesterday we partnered with Rick Rungood for his tools and being able to add those on. So the best deal is the early bird bundle. Gets you all of our content, the stone, boots on the ground, everything that we cover over at Ship It Nation, the Rick Rungood tools, and the SaberSim optimizer, all for $5.49. Just going back to you here, Alex, I know you'll talk a ton about your stuff throughout the show that we got going on, but the big thing you've got going right now is your Discord. If you want to take a minute now just to go through it, I know we'll hit on it in the betting segment later on as well. Betting breakdown, we'll call it.
Yeah, so all the props and pick'em stuff over in my Discord. That will include outright bets. It's going to include a lot of underdog plays. Obviously, the NBA season's going on as well right now, and we've been doing really well in those streets. And then I think, the thing that I'm most excited to talk about in my Discord as the PGA season goes on with in terms of DFS is just really understanding how contest sims have affected the landscape and how, even though maybe like individual player ownership projections are maybe a touch more unpredictable now because of contest sims, there are things about the way people are playing that now is actually making our competition a lot more predictable. And so there are really cool ways to leverage that. We'll talk a lot about that on Leverage Lane, and then really get more in depth over in my Discord whenever I can. And that's been a lot of fun. And then, over at FTN Fantasy as well, the best ownership projections in the game. We have our GPP scores that build on that. GPP scores basically take all the relevant information of a slate for a player, combine it into one metric that basically tells you if the player's under-owned or over-owned. And those have been really helpful. And those were actually created specifically for PGA, and they were so successful in PGA DFS that we built them out for the other sports, but they are really kind of created for and had the most success in PGA. So very excited for the season, very excited to talk through every single slate with you on the show.
Yeah, you betcha. This is a Go Collect. Our man says PGA DFS is such a fun sweat. I'll never forget anti-sweating Morikawa at the Masters, and he bogeys 18 on Sunday to move me up to first. Thank you, Maury Flowers. So, and that's a shout out to the late great DGen75. I know we'll definitely shout him out here a bunch on this show and try and do as much as we can to keep his legacy going. We've got the Stone over at Ship It Nation. We got all that stuff. But if you guys want to see the Ship It Nation launch show, just go on this channel and watch it. All right, let's get to the Sony Open. Let's talk first about course fit and weather. And I think the big thing is there's definitely weather to talk about this week. People are going to want this week to week, so we can bring it up and go through that. But also one thing we talked about yesterday and sort of planning for the season and making sure we had this thing completely dialed in. It will be an ever-changing landscape as we go down the lane. It's not narrative street, it's leverage lane. We're going to try and go that route. But just to say that, sometimes the industry as a whole, especially when NFL's still going on or the week before or after a major, I always called them quote unquote lazy weeks. It just means like everyone kind of says this is how it's going to be and just almost decides that. We'll talk more on that later with, single entry players. I'm a single entry player. Like, there are you, or is there something else that you can do? And you talked during the NFL season, some good ways to do it, but maybe some ways that you'll know with your golf background. And if you want to tell people some of that stuff, the course fit thoughts could sort of deviate from the rest of the industry. And sometimes that can be your lane, that can be your edge alone. And then it's not about who you play, it's how you play them, as I always like to say, and that's part of it. So where do you want to start with the course fit, weather, and just a little bit of your background in the actual golf world to be able to bring that to the table here as well? I think that's important.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start with my background. Out of college, I turned professional in golf and made a run at the PGA Tour. Never got close to the PGA Tour. I did play one Korn Ferry Tour event. I've gotten to U.S. Open sectionals 5 times now. So a decent player. I think the misconception that I get all the time is people assume that because I am the player that I am, that I have this like inside knowledge, or that I can, watch a guy on TV and say, oh, I can tell that he's dialed in, he's going to play really well tomorrow. It doesn't really work like that. Instead, what my playing background has helped me do is approach my PGA data analysis just from a more informed standpoint and perspective. And so like I think the best example I can give of that is over at FTN, we have changed strokes gained off the tee into strokes gained driving distance and strokes gained driving accuracy. And of course we know that like how good a player is off the tee can be broken down into these two components. I have yet to see anyone else in the industry try to do it this way, though, where you actually have the 2 strokes gain components. And it's made a world of difference. And one of the areas where it's made the most difference is in our course fit model, because what we're trying to do with the course fit model is look at past success at a golf course, everyone in the field, not just who has won, but literally how everyone in the field every single year has done, and say, okay, what skill sets are translating into success at this course? So it's not like, oh, when players have won here, they've gained a ton of strokes putting. Because if you can't predict who's going to gain a ton of strokes putting, that doesn't help you at all. So what we're trying to do is find the skill sets that translate into success, and being able to determine whether off the tee is really important because it's your accuracy off the tee that matters, or your distance off the tee that matters, has really been crucial to our success. And I'm really excited to be able to talk through the course fit model each week here with you as well.
Yeah, you bet. Do you want to start with the weather this week and just sort of, what we have? I know you've got it up, I think, ready to go, and then we can go into that for the Sony Open. I will see. And yeah, again, shout out to our man DGen, Alex
Mhm.
Blickle, hashtag not a poor. He's got windy.com and he's going to break it all down to be able to go through it. What do you got here, my friend?
Not a poor. I think it's like $3 a month. So it's really not an
Hey,
issue.
some people don't got that kind of money, man. Just to be grateful, Alex.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, windy.com though is what I use for wind. It's what DGen used for wind. I think it's fantastic. And one of the things that's awesome is like most weeks you can literally just search the golf course. So I think you might even be able to see like, yeah, here's Port Royal, there's Silverado, Country Club of Jackson. Like that's just what I've looked up in the past. This is literally how I use my subscription.
That could have been very bad showing search histories. Now, Windy, probably not going to find much.
Windy.com, I think we're safe there.
You're safe there.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the other thing is like this week, you can't search the course, except you can literally go to the island, zoom in, find the golf course. And now once you click here, when you bring up, let's see, where did it actually go? Nope. Let me refresh this. Because we usually get a bar down here that shows everything. And the only problem with Windy is they give so much information. Sometimes you can't find all the information you're actually looking for.
I got to teach them something about less is more, the model, man. We talk about it all the time. It's like, it's almost too much sometimes, but once you get good at it and understand it, there is a way that you can kind of,
where did it go?
Better about what it is. I don't know. It was there and then it just went away at the bottom. I saw it.
Yeah, that was really strange. It was as soon as I hit the search button. I shouldn't have done that.
Maybe when you go back to the search location and click it again, it'll pull it back up.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
So there it is. And then, yeah, we can show everybody how we found it. It's over on the right-hand side. And I want to say it's like, oh, there it is. We got it.
We're back,
Boom.
baby.
There's the club. And you can see like now it is grabbing the weather from literally on the golf course. And so when we go to this 1 hour breakdown, we can go over to Thursday. And now we're seeing the projected winds. You can see how much stronger it's supposed to be in the afternoon on Thursday than this early morning. But then on Friday, it's pretty equal throughout the day. So this can obviously change. And I would imagine that the weather forecasts aren't quite as strong, over in Hawaii as they are when you can actually like just search the place, because it means that there are more and more, weather stations, things of that nature. But as of right now, it does seem like there might be an advantage to getting the best playing conditions probably of the entire week. Like you can see the wind's going to still be up on Saturday and Sunday. So potentially the best scoring conditions of the week early Thursday morning. So maybe you want to just stack that wave and hope that you get off to a great start and just kind of roll from there.
Yeah, one thing I want to note, and this is, again, I know it's just a little thing, but not everybody looks at this stuff. I'm always trying to bring the DFS perspective side of it. There is only 7 players $8,000 or above that start in the PM. So, I think ownership, and we'll get to that shortly anyway, and I know at this point it's already trending for that direction. So again, don't let that scare you off. We're going to, every week, we're going to be talking about how it applies to the slate. The goal of this show too, just so you guys know, is to make it more evergreen. Well, it's going to be slate specific. That makes it really good where if you get to an event later in the season, again, it doesn't have to be the same course, but it's like, man, I remember there was an episode, almost like a season of a series or something. Like I remember there was an episode where they talked about this, or I forget what they said about no cut events, but it was the first no cut event of this year. I remember it. I want to go back to that episode and see what they said for the information side of it. And you can just go back and find it and be able to catch up on that stuff again. That's the type of stuff that keeps you sharp. So we'll try and bring up points that are applicable to where we're at, but I'm just saying some of this stuff will matter. And for this week, that is interesting. A lot of the already options above 8K, the options above 8K, are already in the morning. There's only 7 options that are not, of probably 25, give or take. So pretty wild.
Yeah. And I will say there on that note too, is like, it honestly matters less for the best players in the field because they don't need the weather help the way a lot of the cheaper guys do. And conversely, like they're less likely to get, if let's say it's a half stroke or a full stroke tougher to be in the Thursday afternoon, Friday AM wave than the Thursday AM, Friday PM wave. That's less likely to hurt the guys up top. It's less likely to make them miss the cut. That could mean that a guy who's playing pretty well for his usual game, down at $7,200 or whatever, that could be the difference between making and missing the cut. So it definitely matters more for the cheap guys. And so it doesn't really bother me that most of the better players are in the good wave because I care more about it for the value guys. And that actually means that, there might be fewer value guys in the early wave. So that can end up being a really good advantage that way.
I want to ask this one because I think it's kind of funny. It's, pop culture, relevancy, everything. But like over the weekend, there was huge viral pieces of Tom Brady breaking down how to throw a football in the wind. And you talk about golf, obviously subjective. Like there's no well, if it's 18.5 miles per hour, what happens at 18.5 is the 17th dimple on the ball from the left side, starting with the T on the Titleist, does this. It's not like that. So it's like, what type of conversation should really be had? Or do you think, is there any misconceptions? What is your thoughts around something like Ryan is asking here with, actually considering it and thinking about it? And then is there anything different from the DFS perspective side of it's like just the difference of let's try and get more 6-6s really versus complicating things?
Yeah. So I love the way he phrased this because it gets to a really key point, which is the wind does not have a linear effect in the sense that like the difference between a 10-mile-an-hour wind and a 15-mile-per-hour wind is less important than the difference between 15 and 20, which is less important than 20 and 25. The higher you get, the more important the wind becomes, and that is true, like increasingly so as you get up. And for anyone who saw what Brady was saying is basically he was talking about like the tilt of the football. If the nose is tilted up, the wind gets underneath and it shoots the ball up. Well, the same can be said about the way a golf ball is spinning. The more backspin is on the ball, the more the wind is going to just shoot the ball up when you're into the wind. And so there's also like a difficulty where if you're into the wind, you want less spin so that the wind affects it less. If you're hitting into a crosswind, you want more spin because that backspin, just like the rotation of a bike tire, is going to help it hold its line. The faster it's spinning, the less the wind is going to push the ball sideways. So there's this really like interesting dichotomy there where you're trying to decrease spin in one instance, increase spin in another, but you also have to keep the ball down so that the wind doesn't affect it. The longer it's in the air, obviously, the more the wind is going to knock it offline. And so the whole point here is that playing in wind is an entirely different skill set than playing in calm conditions. And so ordinarily with golf, like we really have to be cognizant of the sample size that we're using. And more often than not, slashing the sample size to try and get a more relevant sample is actually wrong in golf when you just want like as much of a sample size as you possibly can. I think wind is one of the few exceptions because it really is this different skill, and you have to be able to increase spin when you need to and decrease spin when you need to, and you need to be able to shape the ball into a left to right wind and also into a right to left wind to keep your dispersion down. So yeah, really like interesting, fun discussion that we get to have right off the bat here because we have really potentially windy conditions here in Hawaii. And the other thing I'd say is whenever you have a course on the coast like this, you can always almost like just add 5 miles per hour to the forecast. Because in fact, like here, I can zoom out and you'll see what I mean. These like little lines that you see here, Tambo, can you see those well? I don't know if
it's if you go in a little bit more, I don't know if they'll be there if you zoom in is the only problem, but I can see what you're talking about. Yeah.
Okay. You can see that they're slower on the land than they are off land. And so whenever you have this instance of, you're playing on the coast, you can end up getting like drastically different winds on the golf course than what you're seeing in forecast. And that would especially be true if the wind were coming from the opposite direction and the land hadn't already slowed it down to some degree. So if we get a wind shift, so let's see, Thursday, it's there. So it doesn't look like we're going to get a wind shift, but that's like, to me, that's one of the most overlooked aspects of wind is a lot of the time, everyone only talks about the wind speed and not the wind direction. And a lot of the time it's like from Thursday morning to Thursday afternoon, you might get a 180-degree turn. And one of those directions is likely to be a lot more difficult than the other. We saw that a lot last year. I think we saw it at the Scottish Open in like a massive way where it was like a stroke and a half difference, especially on the back nine. And we were able to just totally clean up on Underdog that day because Underdog had no idea that wind shift was coming, or they didn't realize that it was going to change the difficulty of a hole. And one of the easier holes on the course became one of the toughest holes on the course. And we just had overs on one hole score and they all hit. So yeah, that kind of thing can be super, super advantageous if you know what to look for.
Yeah, one thing I want to have as a main takeaway from it, though, that you said is perfect. I've said this forever. I know we just did the partnership with Rick yesterday. You talked about looking at granular stats and stuff like that. Like I've always said this forever of people looking at like just the 24 months or sorry, just the last 24 weeks or whatever. Like, I'm just looking at a little bit of a section here, and it's like if you can play in the wind, we want the longer. If you have a long sample of playing well in the wind. And then you consider the strength of field. And we're going to talk about that. It's a good segue, getting into the Sony Open here, and we'll get to the chalk build and all of this is like, okay, is there separation in this field? Like it plays way harder, where that's where like a Scotty over 4 days crushes people versus if it's a birdie fest. That's why people say, it can be more variance in that because it's like Scotty's skill set doesn't really apply as much. Everyone can go out and make 9 birdies a day if they play well enough, and that could be up in the mix and outscoring, etc. But when you have that long sample, that could get you to a unique play within your build. It's not just about the play. It's like now it's like I'm considered, someone said they've been bad. Their recent form is bad. First of all, they didn't even play that much in the fall swing. Second of all, we're looking at something different here to recognize why we might be putting them into the lineup or the build and think about it from that perspective. And it doesn't always catch up, like you said, with props, pick'ems. No different in NFL. You'll see it sometimes where they don't adjust enough for O-line or D-line or something like that, where it's out and like, man, that's actually a pretty big deal now. And the team can shut down and lock in on this and you don't see it change. So sometimes when you find those things, you want to use them to your advantage. And I know you and I talked pre-show, this will get into going into start talking about the chalk here, but only 20 minutes in, we're going to be fine. I'll say this, last season, right now today, and we're going to talk about these guys in a minute. Russell Henley, JJ Spawn, Corey Connors. I get it. They're going to out project. It's golf, medium projection, so on and so forth. It's not NBA. But just noting that if last season, this exact time, imagine we did this show last year, you just rewind a year. We said, man, can't wait to see the big year that Russell Henley, Corey Connors, and JJ Spawn are going to have. We'll be talking about them in 2026 as the top dogs. Probably not something anybody said. Maybe a couple here and there. They have their guys and like them. Everyone has their golfers. But why I'm saying all that, you and I talked a little pre-show on this, is like that's kind of the difference on a week like this. This is not a field where we have they're not Scotty Scheffler in this field. Like there's definitely something, and they're going to be projections outliers. And this matters for your single entries or for how you're thinking about stuff. It'll especially matter when it comes to my leverage lane later. But I'll tell you this, they're not necessarily those outliers. And if you just took a step back for 2 seconds and said 3 weeks from now, a month from now, could we be saying like, wow, surprise Morikawa came out so hot? Or when Decky gets hot, that's crazy. It happens. He hasn't withdrawn. He's more healthy, etc. Like, what is the difference? And talk to me a little bit about that. And then you want to add there.
Yeah. So this is a perfect segue into the course fit model for this week. And for those who haven't heard me talk about course fit model in the past, you and I have done some shows together. So I know a lot of people listening already have. So apologies if you have to hear this spiel for the second or third or fourth or fifth time, as I know many probably have. But what we do with our course fit model is we're looking at strokes gained, driving distance, driving accuracy, approach, around the green, and putting. And again, we're trying to figure out how these skills translate to success at the course. And so what the model spits out is a percentage for each skill. So for example, this week we have a negative 30% weight on putting. So what this means is you take any skill difference between two players. So let's look at, for example, let's go Henley and Colin Morikawa. So for our estimates, we have Henley gaining 0.14 strokes per round over this field putting and Morikawa losing 0.21. So there's a 0.35 stroke difference in skill between Henley and Morikawa. What the negative 30% putting weight means is that 0.35 skill difference is going to translate to only 70% of that here. So I'm not going to do that math off the top of my head, but maybe like a 0.25 difference instead of 0.35. So when we look at the whole course fit model for this week, we actually have 5 negative weights. We've got negative 56% on driving distance, negative 13% on both driving accuracy and approach play, negative 12% on around the green play, and then that negative 30% weight on putting. So now the next question we have to get to is, okay, why is this? Why are all of the skills at this golf course translating into less of an advantage than usual? And I think it's actually less about the golf course and more about the time of year this event is played, because what we're doing here is we start by, formulating a strokes gain profile for each player. Who is this guy? How good is he at each skill? And the truth is that estimate is a lot better in July and August when we have a large sample from the season, we have a large recent sample from each player than it is after this extended break for all these guys. So I think what this model is actually telling us is accuracy off the tee, approach play, around the green play, all are important. And certainly they're more important than distance and putting here. But the reason why we're getting these negative weights is because we also have to recognize this week that we should be less confident than we usually are in who is the best player, who is the second best player, how good is this guy? Are we going to see the best version of this player from the last 2 years or the worst version, or obviously more likely somewhere in between? So I think like one of the big advantages this week is just kind of looking at players who either were the best version of themselves that we've seen in the last 3 months that they played, and then say, okay, maybe we shouldn't be quite as confident as we usually are in this guy, or as we were 6 months ago in this guy. And then also find the guys who are really struggling, but have a 2-3 extended year sample of actually being really good players. So I think that's a large part of the advantage this week, is just recognizing how much harder it is in this first week to pinpoint how good each player is and what we should expect from everybody. Yeah,
different than NFL. It's not like we have a preseason to go off of or any like real coach speak or anything. You barely get anything out of these players. So like, it's a lot of like, if you ask any golfer how you feel, and typically they're going to say pretty good, or they're going to say the opposite. And then people take that as, oh, they must not be feeling good. They said this little bit of their swings off, and then they go and play good anyway. Like, oh, I must have found it. And it's like, it's complete opposite. So I like that call out. I definitely think, that's going to be the premise of this show going forward, like what we do and how we set it up. The next segment is going to be talking about the chalk build and what that looks like. A lot of the things we're going to talk about when we go to these sort of tiers that we're talking about, and we're going to start with what we're calling the mega chalk, which is going to be like Henley, Connors, Spawn. That's kind of the main three, and maybe some others that you can chime in throughout, but not going to hit on this, I think, for every single golfer, every single option. But realistically, it's like, is there viable pivots, different roster constructions that we can go with? Are they deserving of the ownership based on the course fit and the weather and the things that we just talked about? And then whether or not we kind of want to solely go with those pivots, or we can look at some sort of combinational stuff. And I know you did a good job of that with NFL. People loved it. So talk to me a little bit about this mega chalk group and how you want to apply some of that stuff to the conversation.
Yeah. So you kind of already touched on it, but it looks like Henley, Spawn, and Corey Connors are being viewed here as like Scotty Scheffler lights almost, where I'm seeing 40% for Russell Henley in single entries, 40% for JJ Spawn in single entries, potentially 35% for Corey Connors in single entries, and just a huge gap before the next guy. Like after that, you get Ben Griffin at 25% in single entries. So a real large drop off after these three. And while our projections agree, Russell Henley is the best player in this field by almost a quarter of a stroke per round, and then JJ Spawn is JJ Spawn is third only to Ben Griffin, and those three are kind of well ahead of everybody else. So like, it's understandable that Henley and Spawn are this popular, but I don't think they should be anywhere near this popular, where to me, like the fair ownership would be, 25% on each. And then you get between 15 and 20 on a lot of the guys around them, like Morikawa and Hideki and Bobby Mack and Siwoo and Keegan and McNeely, these guys. But instead we're seeing 40, 25, 15. And so the gap to me just is too large. So I will definitely be pivoting at the top, or even not playing anyone all the way at the top, which I think we might talk about a little bit more later.
We'll definitely be talking about that. And I think that's important to know. One of the other things too, for people, again, because we're trying to talk from all angles. Obviously, some people here play PGA DFS every year and have a really good feel on this stuff, but we got to talk to everyone. We want people to enjoy this game as much as we all do. And one of the things is like JJ Spawn and Corey Connors fit every build.
Yeah.
Russ, because so I'm playing JJ Spawn, but I'm going to start with him. Okay. The other people are doing that too. It's like, or he's second into a lot, like it's going to be with one of those guys. Oh, but I'm going Ben Griffin. All right. You're 8% less than Henley or whatever the number ends up being. So it's like, you're not really building different. Oh, but I'm getting different down low. Again, it's not who you play. It's how you play. All can be true. It could all work out. I'm just saying you are right away sort of parking yourself. I always talk about it like if there's 100 people in a room and you got to get out, only one person can win. it's like when you park the further you go with the chalk build, if you're not playing cash, we're talking about single entry from a GPP perspective. The $200 single entry I'm playing this week to win 20K or 50, whatever it is for first this week. My point being, when you do that, you're parking yourself at the back of the room. You're just starting behind everyone, and you're like, oh, but those guys are going to race me ahead, and then the others are going to get different. It's possible. If you find something that you like and it works, sure, but you got to be cognizant of all of those factors where you can kind of start in the middle. They can have, the JJ Spawn ride out and get a little bit done for you, and Corey Connors get a little bit done. Let's say you're not on those two, but then you got two others that match or beat them, and then your other four or your natural build is already different. It's like, bye-bye, I'm going. And if you don't, you go to the back, but you'd rather be at the front or the back. We're not trying to play for the middle. So go ahead if you want to add to that.
Yeah, so the way I like to think about it is we basically have two reasons why we should ever fade chalk. The first being that fading the chalk is actually advantageous in its own right because we might leverage a large portion of the field if that chalk fails. And so that type of chalk is, we're trying to leverage very fragile chalk when we're looking at that kind of point of view. I don't view either of these guys as that. They're both very likely to succeed. We have them at 86% and 90% respectively. That's Spawn and Henley to make the cut. We've got Connors at 79% to make the cut. So it's not a likely outcome that we're gaining a big advantage on the field because these chalky players failed. Instead, my reason for potentially fading these guys is the second reason to ever fade chalk, which is using him takes one of your slots that could instead go to a potential separator. And we only get 6 roster spots in PGA. So, I think that is one of the clear differences between PGA and NFL DFS. You only get 6 spots. And that means at maximum, you have 6 possible chances to really help you separate. And every single chalk piece that you use is one fewer opportunity to separate. And this week, we have some really good, very talented, equally good in my mind players around these guys who are low owned and potential separators. I'd rather go with the separator than the really chalky guy who I don't think is anywhere near as much better than these other guys as what the field is seemingly suggesting with this ownership.
Yeah, and I'll just add a quick one now. It's not my lane, and we're not even at this point, but because we're on the mega chalk, I just give one quick example. But this is a prime spot where you look at Corey Connors, and first of all, the key component I always say, you can play both of these guys. That could be a way to get different, where most people are going to choose to pivot off Corey Connors if they are to go to somebody else or just go with him. I'll just use a quick one, but Goddard is $100 cheaper. He's not going to project as good. His make the cut is not that much further behind. And again, it's not about the play. It's just about breaking down the concept for you. We just watched him hit these stingers and talk about being able to hit those. That could play well in the wind. He's going out the exact same time as Corey Connors, and you could play him instead of, or you could play him with, and that could be a pure separator play where at the end of the week, they could both make the cut. And you're like, the Corey Connors chalk got there, finished 22nd or 24th, good week for him. Not the best, but good enough for that price tag. But Goddard sitting top 3, challenging to win the event on Sunday, where there may be lineups that didn't need both, just had Goddard instead for $100 less. And that's the pivot where you're like, oh, stupid Corey Connors got me. It's and you look at the difference in ownership, it could be 25% in single entry between those two as a delta. And again, projection won't get you there. This is where you're going to have to think about this stuff in your build and add it that way, but just making a little note like that. So, all right. What else do you want to talk about? The only other thing I was going to add, those two fit every build. Henley fits every build. That pick your poison when we get to the secondary chalk or the value chalk, whatever you like in the value range. A lot of people just like to click that and then go up to the top, right? I can get one of Henley or Griffin or Spawn, whatever you do, 2 of them, all these factors. So it's I don't know if you have more to add on that, but I think that's the other thing that people need to recognize. It's not always just because of their past play or last season. It's also a lot of the roster construction that starts to naturally happen when you start with these plays that you like down low and then just build up from there, vice versa.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'll add is if we're trying to identify what the chalk build is going to look like here, I think most lineups are going to include at least 2 of these guys. Yes. Maybe not most, but a lot of lineups are going to include at least 2 of these guys. And then you're getting into the secondary chalk after that. You're getting Rye and Pendrith and Wrighton and Grillo and Michael Kim, Ryan Gerard. So we'll kind of go through all these chalk guys, but it's a very interesting slate the way the pricing is set here, because they're clear tiers of these guys, right? And by tiers I mean price ranges. So you have Henley and Spawn up top, and you could almost say they're in two different tiers, just like Connors is in a different tier than those guys price range wise. So then maybe Connors goes with Rye, Henley goes with Spawn, and then you have Pendrith and Wrighton right next to each other in price at $7,600 each. You have Grillo, Kim, and Gerard all at $7,300 or $7,400, and then you get the next tier down, like potentially Kanaya and McGreevy at $6,900. They might be chalky. So you have like this very clear section, and people might just go down the list and they say, okay, this is my favorite from that top tier. This is my favorite from that second tier. Here are my favorites from the third tier, and build that way. And so you have to either find a way to get different within those tiers, which is maybe harder to do, or you say, okay, I'm just going to have a different structure where I'm going to grab 4 from this, mid tier, skip the top, skip the next one. That's kind of getting to the idea of, it's not who you play, it's how you play them, which you talk about so well and have talked about on Pat's show for years as well. So I think that's a familiar concept to people now, and it's one that is like front and center here in this first week.
Yeah, and it's also because, this week too, I think from the value perspective, that's what matters, because that's what sort of closes it out. Like you could get to if you go Henley Spawn and drop down, or, Henley Connors and go down there, Spawn Connors and go a little bit more balanced, then you get your rise and whatever. But I think people will not necessarily go 6-0 as much as people think, because when you look at the values, and meaning like 6 guys from the morning, if they are playing a weather angle, because you have Gerard, who's super high value, but is a PM/AM tee time. And I think people will ignore that. McGreevy, 6,900. McCarty. By the way, you could just build a lineup this week with Max McGreevy, Matt McCarty, Mac Meisner, Mav McNeely, like you name it. There's the double M's. If there was a Millie Maker this week, I would think about making the double M Millie Maker lineup, but there's not. So, shut up the DK to ruin it on the first week, poor them, but just go with it. There is like Berger at 7,500, a little bit. Like I'm just looking at some of these value plays that people are rolling to. So that at least is somewhat intriguing. When it comes to the value plays, like let's use, Wrighton or Kim, Gerard, those guys. What's your takeaways on players like that? And I know we talked like some of the original stuff about like whether they're deserving of the ownership versus like so many guys around them that will have like little to no ownership. There's a ton of really good players in this field. How do you sort of view that? And then if you want to apply it to that kind of group, you can as well. And we can still talk some pivots and stuff up in the top range also with like Henley and whatnot. I think there's some stuff there.
Yeah. So as I kind of talked about, like the 2 reasons to fade chalk, when I'm playing chalk, it means that guy is like very clearly the best play in that range. And also there isn't like a severely under-owned play in that range that I could use instead. And so when I look through this slate, I don't see myself using much chalk at all. And I'll use Aaron Rye as the example here. Like I think PGA is really, really awesome from a data perspective. And this is why the GPP scores were created, like for PGA, and why they were so successful from the get-go, is because we have these like very clear definitions of success and failure for a PGA player. If we look at top 5 odds versus missed cut odds for anyone in this field, let's take Aaron Rye, for example. For context, we have Aaron Rye projected as the best player under $8,600. So under Corey Connors, he has our highest expected strokes gained at 0.79. He has our highest top 5 odds. He has our highest made cut odds. But what are those actual numbers? 10.5% chance of a top 5, 21.1% chance of a missed cut. So literally twice as likely to fail as he is to really give you that like majorly successful, is going to help you take down a tournament type performance. So when that type of player is 24% owned, as we have him projected in single entry, to me, that's just too high. And it's not that people are overrating him. It's just that the PGA DFS field hasn't quite caught on to how volatile these players are. And so basically every single week, I think the highest owned players, outside of maybe Scotty when he really is like that much more likely to succeed than anybody else, the highest owned players are almost universally over-owned And you can't have a handful of guys who are automatically overowned without having a handful of guys who are then automatically underowned. And so I definitely play more contrarian lineups across the board in PGA than I do in any other sports. Where like in NFL DFS, I will very, very rarely not have at least, let's say, 2 guys 25% or above. In PGA DFS, I've had really, really successful weeks in the past where my highest owned player was 8%. I'm always more willing to just be contrarian off the board in PGA DFS. And again, that's because we only have to get 6 spots right. It's easier to hit on 6 contrarian spots than it is to hit on 9 contrarian spots. Obviously, that's the case. So, yeah, just one of the cool ways that PGA DFS is different. And to answer your question, it makes me a lot less likely to play Pendrith, Wright, and Rye. Not necessarily because I think that they aren't very good players in their price range, but because fading them just gives me an opportunity to find an underowned potential separator who I think is at least like comparable skill-wise and course fit-wise this week.
Yeah, and I'll definitely be talking about that. I know, like I said, I got my lane pretty teed up already, pun intended, but I'm excited because I think it's just a way that you can just get different, pivot, and also build different on this week. But do you have anything else in the mega chalk range you want to talk about, like from a viable pivot perspective? I know we talked a little pre-show about a one Colin Morikawa, but there's other alternatives. I just thought that's at least somewhat interesting. He's definitely not going to project as well. There's guys like Corey Connors projects basically the same as Morikawa, again, give or take, or different sites, different things, but just noting it, that's kind of part of the conversation. But I guess, Colin Morikawa could be a guy up top that just gets you naturally different. He even has a morning tee time. In our course fit rankings, he still fits really well. We've literally watched this guy throw away tournaments and lose like 7-stroke leads in Hawaii before, different thing. But my point being, who knows? But it would shock nobody if Colin Morikawa won this event. It's like, that's the main point in my eyes.
Yes. I absolutely want to talk about Morikawa because I think he fits a number of the things that we've talked about here. So number one, great wind player. In the last 3 years, if you look at his last 36 windy rounds, he's gained 1.48 strokes per round, and he's gained strokes in 71% of those rounds. So 1.48, 71%. If you take all of his rounds combined in that time frame, 0.87 gained per round and gaining in 65% of his rounds. So very clearly better in wind than in the calm conditions relative to the field. And that, by the way, I think is a kind of an important point there is like when you evaluate how good is this guy in wind, you don't just want to look at his raw strokes gained because typically you're still going to see the same as usual. The better players are better. The worst players are worse. You want to be looking at how they do in windy conditions compared to their baseline. And in this case, Morikawa is much better in windy conditions than his baseline. So that makes him interesting to me. The second thing is he really, really fits this definition of guys who weren't their usual selves down the second half of last season. And maybe just by returning to their long-term form are a lot better plays this week than what most projection models around the industry, ours included, are saying. We only have him projected to gain 0.67 strokes per round. And that's over half a stroke behind Ben Griffin and JJ Spawn. Morikawa is the better long-term player than these guys, and we have him projected over half a stroke behind per round. So he could really close that gap. And part, like, I don't really care about the fact that, he now has at least a 2-year history of starting really hot in Hawaii. To me, the more important thing is a year ago to date, this is a guy who came out and gained 4.3 strokes at the Century, 1.7 at AT&T, 1.6 at Genesis, 3.8 at the API, 2.8 at the Players, and then 2 per round at the Masters. Like, this is one of the best players in the world when he's playing well. And after an extended break like this, the chance that he's back to that form is a lot higher than him just randomly finding it in a random October event or September event, or even in the FedEx Cup playoffs where his iron play was great, but the rest of his game didn't come around. So I think there's enough from Morikawa to really confidently play him in DFS this week. Doesn't mean you have to. It isn't necessarily a priority because he has to also beat the highest probability plays in the slate. But from just a pure, like, what are the chances that he is the best player in this field at the end of the year compared to his ownership, I think he's the clear guy there.
Yeah, which is, again, I know that last year matters. You can't just throw it out the window. We talk about this all the time, and specifically in golf, it's different than the other sports in that sense of, like, NFL can be a coaching regime, probably hashtag too soon and, sore spot for you, but like offensive coordinator can come in and mess things up and, all this stuff. In golf, yes, you can lose your game, gain it. But like I said, if you go back to, if it's just 365 days ago, we're sitting here having the same conversation. If we say to the chat, yo, everybody in here is over 100, almost 120 people watching. We appreciate you. If we say Morikawa, Henley, or Ben Griffin, what gets pumped in every single time? It's going to be Morikawa. It's just then he goes and has the year that he did. Those guys have the year they did, and now it's like auto assumed. So somebody asked earlier, like about adjusting projections. I do think if you're playing, MME, you can do it in golf. You can do it with just the exposures, right? You can make it so you can X the guy out and get 0 of him, and instead get more of another guy that you're going to now pick up around them. You can make sure you have a min exposure on a guy like that, like Morikawa, if you want. You can change the projection. If you're using contest sims, I would recommend changing the projection so you actually get the appropriate contest ROIs that are related to that. But if you don't get mad that the ROI is not reflecting as good as you want, because you're using a player with a projection that's not adjusted for, but your mind is saying, I'm adjusting them in because of this. So just noting that. But where else do you want to go next? And what do you want to take it on from here, Alex? I like where you were going with that one. Is there other stuff that you want to talk about up top or in these ranges? Or do you want to go to sort of some of the value range and start talking about that?
Maybe we should just use Morikawa as a segue to talk about like other players who fit this mold of who's the guy who was struggling at the end of last year and therefore isn't projecting well, but could regain his form from the get-go this year. And, in a month from now, we're talking about, oh my God, can you believe he was that cheap and that low on at the Sony when we know that this guy has been this quality of player for years and years now. So if you want to go that route, I think the next guy to talk about might be Jordan Spieth at $8,300. Obviously, he hasn't been, dominant in years and years, but he is still a quality player. And the thing that I like about Spieth, the thing that really makes me excited is he has really turned around his greatest weakness. So when you looked at, why was he struggling in 2022 and 2021 and 2020, a lot of it was his accuracy off the tee just kind of stunk. And he was way too often putting himself in position where he wasn't able to take advantage of how good his iron play is and how good his short game is because he was constantly out of position. But last year we really saw the driver become more accurate. He actually kind of lost maybe a touch of distance compared to the previous year, but was still sneaky long and just significantly more accurate. And then throughout the season, we also saw the spikes that we need to see from him for a win in all the categories. He had weeks where he was phenomenal with his irons. He had weeks where he made everything. He had weeks where he was dominant around the greens. He just never put it all together at the same time. So I'm very encouraged by what we saw from him last year. I'm very encouraged by just, I think, his potential in wind too, by the way, like a very strong wind player. So I think that there's a chance that he starts this season strong. And more importantly, there's a chance that he puts those, those high volatile skill sets together this year more than he did last year. So instead of having 8 top 20s, maybe he has 6 top 20s, but 2 wins or something like that. And that makes me very interested in Spieth just all season long, and no reason not to start with him here in the first week at $8,300 and what looks like single digit ownership.
Yeah, and talking about viable pivots, like again, there's going to be, don't forget, if we get to single entry, a guy like Rye is going to get steamed up even more. Typically, again, 8,200 fits all the molds. He fits the ballot. If someone goes Spawn Connors, very easy to fit Rye. And also, if people are looking at the AM guys more so, that's going to boost Rye even more. You could see a 4-to-1 ownership gap on Rye versus Spieth. And again, same conversation anytime besides just looking at the last year. A lot of people will be looking at Spieth. And it's not just always betting on talent. If you guys are listening close to what Alex is saying, he's not just saying the guys that are the talents and the capable names that you would know from past history and like almost taking like, oh, this is former Masters champ and all this stuff, like all these different things. It's like also what would fit the course, the breakdown of, the people getting treated like a Scotty Scheffler outlier in projections and whatnot, when realistically it may not actually be that way, not just because of their talent level or name or skill. They actually have, to Alex's point, high probability of making the cut for you and giving you that opportunity over the weekend. But these are options that could also make the cut with them. Like Spieth is 5% behind Rye on made the cut odds or something. And those are just the odds. I'm just saying it's not that much further behind. You need them both to make a cut. Yes. Or one of them if you're pivoting. But once they get there, anything could happen. And if Spieth has the better weekend, now you're talking about over 36 holes and not just over the 72 once they get there. So it's like there's all kinds of opportunity from that perspective, but it's a viable option based on everything you said, not just, well, I think Jordan Spieth could be better than Aaron Rai. It's not always that simple. So yeah, I like how you broke that down. What else? What else are you thinking here?
Yeah, let's see. Who else fits this mold? Maybe Billy Horschel as well, coming back from injury. He's going to play a lot. Looked good in TGL. I don't think we should take much of anything from TGL, but it can't hurt that he looked good there. And I like the fact that he seems like really geared up to play a bunch. And he did kind of show some signs of life. Like he was very good at the Bank of Utah Championship in October, finished 11th there. A lot of it was short game and putting, so I would have liked to see the ball striking be better. But this is a guy who was playing pretty good golf before his injury. He had multiple top tens, Valspar and the AT&T Pebble Beach. So he could return to form a little bit here, much healthier than he was last season. I'm going to throw out a name that actually, before I get to the really scary one, Sahith Theegala, I think, is a perfect definition of this. Last year, I thought that he really kind of got into his own head and was trying to fix some of the issues that he had previously. In 2024, he was in contention a ton, but didn't get it done, and especially played really poorly, like in the final round of the PGA Championship. And it seemed like he was maybe trying to figure out how he could solve that issue, and then ended up changing some things that he maybe shouldn't have changed, and just kind of got all out of sorts with his game. And he's very much, you can tell, like somebody who he's going to play really well when he's playing well, and he's going to struggle when he's struggling, because he's very like emotionally reactionary. So I think just having the fresh start of a new season could really help him. Tony Finau's a bounce back candidate in that way as well. The really ugly name that I'm interested in, all the way down at $6,300, is Tom Hoge. And he played horribly last year. But it was really strange. It wasn't like he struggled for the whole season. If you look at his season, he was really good for a stretch in March and April. The irons were dominant, as they often are. He finished 7th at the Memorial in June, and then it kind of fell off the wagon. So he hit the ball well at the U.S. Open, but lost his stroke and a half putting and missed the cut. And then that was sort of the theme. He lost the ball striking, in large part, I think, because his putting was so bad that he was just like in his head and couldn't figure out. He lost 4.4 strokes per round putting at the Open Championship, 3.9 the following week at the 3M Open. You can't play golf that way. Right. Of course, your ball striking is going to struggle. The putter kind of stabilized at the FedEx and the BMW Championship, but the ball striking was still gone. And then you get into the fall. He finished 21st at the WW Technology Championship. He gained a stroke per round with the irons at the Bank of Utah Championship. The main key, though, is we're talking about one of the best wind players in the world. So in windy conditions, in those last 3 years, he's gained 1.01 strokes per round. He's lost 0.35 strokes per round elsewhere. He's gained in 56% of those windy rounds, only gained in 46% of other rounds. So I think the combination, just the long layoff with the really, really good wind play, makes him interesting as a 1% $6,300 player. I don't know that he's going to make my single entry. The fact that I'm a single entry player means, I might not do anything about this. And so he's only 150 to 1 in betting markets, by the way. Like, I thought I might be able to get a 250 or 300 to 1 number on him, in which case I would have ran to that. But I think he's interesting at 6,300, and he fits this mold of guy that we have like a long track record of being a much, much, much better player than what his current price suggests.
I like that. Our man Jay Bannock said, but are there casinos in Hawaii? If so, no Hoagie. But definitely something to think about when you're playing. Nick had brought up earlier, he this is a good way to put it too, either a 62 or an 82. But again, people should remember too, I think Alex has dropped a pretty good nugget there, if you will, of the setup around if he's only he's playing one lineup, single entry, and you can put it in whatever else he's building it for. But just noting it, he may drop some of these nuggets that he can't get to, or he may have to get to it in a betting market, like a top 40 or something that he plays like an outright each, whatever he can get to. But the point being, you may be able to use that if you play more lineups. But one note would be, these are the types of players that you are looking for in your MME pools. Like, you want that volatility, because that 62 spike on Saturday, and now he's in the mix. and now he's right there for you. If you've got a significant portion of them, and that in this case, it could be 5 to 10% of your portfolio, 10% on 150 lineups. If you're not talking single entry for a minute, that's 15 lineups now. You've now got 15 Hoge lineups that are in the mix, and most people don't have any. So it's like that can be what changes the game for you.
And not only that, but I think this comment from Nick is fantastic. The 62 or 82, because play him in showdown. You can think it's the dumbest idea in the world to play Tom Hoge on main slate, and maybe it is, but play him in showdown because he has that. Like, he's going to give you a slate breaking showdown performance significantly more often than anybody else, even remotely near his price tag. So it's a perfect kind of summary of who Hoge is as a player, and it very much it does just like work to kind of apply the label of showdown play versus main slate play to a lot of these guys.
Yeah, our man Kenny said, been caught in meetings all morning, but excited for this collab. Best of luck. Best of luck to you as well. It's a fun year ahead. We've got our man Chad in here, Millie Maker winner from last season. Love to see that. He said, I had a dream Tom Hoge won. So, just tough to say, but you get in on that stuff. I want to bring up a more talking point around just strategy for 2 seconds, because Marquis brings up something, and obviously, having the winner is certainly nice, but that's like building your pool around it. And then you get to that. But this is also why we focus so heavily on this show, even during the NFL season, and now debuting it for the PGA season, on how to play, not who to play. Because typically, like, just realistically, nobody really knows anything. Like, even those with the betting cards, 7 to 10 bets, they're betting accordingly, and that makes sense. Show the receipts, hopefully, but just noting it, they're betting on a 7 to 1. So it's like, say, like 100 to 1 gets there for them, and that's the victory lap and excitement, but they didn't win 100 to 1, and they're openly admitting that, and that's okay. They're betting accordingly. I'm just saying that's kind of like DFS. If you're playing more lineups, you're saying, like, if I'm building a portfolio, it's to achieve this. The guesswork is, let's try and build our lineups that we can kind of figure out. And the difference versus betting outrights and playing DFS is we have a significant amount of information in DFS where we can account for steam, moonwalks, ownership, roster construction, field type that we're playing in, types of players we're going up against, the lineup selection that we can put in to that tournament, just so many other factors. It doesn't mean it's easier. Don't take this the wrong way. Just stating we have a lot more information where you can use this to help build the puzzle in your own way, your lane, leverage lane, but also being able to use it towards like a strategy and a thought process about winning a game versus picking a winner. That's way harder to do.
Yeah, there are 2 things I want to say about this comment that a 50 to 1 guy has won a bunch here recently. The first is, we never want to overreact to this type of thing. And the way we don't overreact to something is first trying to understand why it's been the case. So one potential explanation is, let's go back to this course fit model. Every single weight was negative, right? And so the skill gaps are less here on this course than they would be on a US Open course, or than they would be at Muirfield Village, any, mainstay PGA Tour course. So that's part of it. It's just bringing the best players down towards the middle of the pack. So you have, more, just more guys are in play to actually win. But the second thing here is, let's look at the odds this week. There's nobody 10 to 1 or better to win. I'm just looking at FanDuel for the moment, just to rattle off these numbers. There are only 5 guys better than 20 to 1. There are only 4 more guys between 20 and 30. So you get to the 10th most likely guy to win, and already you're at 30 to 1 in this event. So the likelihood of a 10 to 1 guy winning, it's impossible. There isn't a 10 to 1 guy. So the fact that somebody 50 to 1 has won a bunch recently doesn't really tell us anything. And another thing there is, like, let's count the number of guys between 40 and 60 to 1. There are more between 40 and 60 than there are 30 and below. So it makes sense that someone in that range has won so often here. And honestly, like, it shouldn't surprise us if 120 to 1 wins. The same sort of idea. There are so many guys in that price range. It doesn't mean that any one, specific 50 to 1 player is more likely to win this week than his odds suggest. It just means that there are more of those guys. So just something to keep in mind, and kind of the way to always think through this stuff. Because that's a trend I've noticed that, the industry loves, is like, oh, who has won here in the past? Let me search for someone in that range. and that's who I'm going to bet on this week. It doesn't really work that way, and this is why.
Yeah, but usually they don't go granular on it either. Like Kenny talks about, sometimes the field strength changes quite drastically, or the course setup switches, or also it's like, did they really look at the board or just the winner? Because if you look, like there's like 3 guys behind them that were 10-1, 20-1, 25 to 1. It's like, actually it was just that last putt or the playoff or whatever that forced a 50-1 winner into it. Again, Marquis always here supporting. We appreciate you. It's not really anything about you. It's about the statement you made, just trying to, let others understand it. It's all about helping each other. And that's when you bring up something like that, it helps us explain it better to people to try and help them love this game as much as we do and get good at it. The viewers continue to grow, so I'm excited. If you guys are just joining us for the first time, make sure to hit that thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. We'll be doing this every Wednesday, 10:30 a.m. Eastern. But I think we'll keep it rolling. If you got the time to stick around, man, and talk a little bit more on these values. I know you gave some good pivots up top. Down low, it kind of goes with this. I don't want to spend too long on this, but because it can be a whole nother tangent for like another show. But obviously it'll come up again earlier in the season. People are trying to pick their guys. I know this guy from DP World Tour. I love this guy from Korn Ferry. You can kind of go down a deep dive on that stuff, or you'll completely go off the rails on this stuff. And it's like, you talked about having nobody over 8%, but people have, 4 up and comers that they think are going to have a good season in their lineup. Can it work? Yeah, sure. Because of the field strength and everything we just talked about, maybe it works, but typically it's like, you kind of got to pick your poison. Just using that as a segue into sort of some of the values this week. How do you think about that stuff? And then what's your thoughts on some of the values that are being talked about down in the 7K and upper 6Ks for this week?
Yeah, there's one kind of comparison that I think is really fun to make down here this week. Let's look at Michael Kim versus Michael Brennan. And the reason I want to look at these guys is because Michael Brennan's projected at 4% single entry ownership for us right now. Michael Kim's at 22%. And the other interesting thing about these two guys is they were both really high best ball picks. I don't know how many people watching were playing PGA best ball over on Underdog, the PME Open and the Scramble, but Michael Kim was a top 10 pick. And obviously best ball ADP does not reflect how good the player is. It's largely about how often we think they're going to play. But there are a lot of guys who we expect to play a lot early who have the equivalent status to Brennan or Michael Kim and didn't get picked this high. So Michael Kim and Michael Brennan were both really high best ball picks. Brennan ended up 20th, something like that. Both really high best ball picks, both very similar price tags this week. One is super chalk, the other is not. We have Brennan projected to gain 0.37 strokes per round, Michael Kim to gain 0.38 strokes per round. So to me, this is one of those ownership differences and discrepancies that just really just pops out as, why is this the case? This is something we should take advantage of. I really like Brennan. I don't know, again, that I'm going to play him because I only have one lineup to choose from. So, I'm invariably going to have players that I really like and think that are really good plays this week who don't make my lineup. He's definitely one of the guys who I'm considering and I think is a phenomenal play, whether or not he ends up in my lineup.
If we live in the world of NFL for just 2 seconds, talk about the old red zone quad box. Mm-hmm. What would you say to this? Like, you just talked about Brennan. I'll keep him in the quad box, but you probably have all of these in front of you. Doing that same example with Wrighton, Pendrith, and let's say Eric Cole, just 3 other guys that typically always get a little bit of steam, maybe less Cole this week once the final stuff all comes out, but let's just like Wrighton for sure, Pendrith for sure. How do you see like Brennan around those guys? Because Brennan's also in between Berger, Meisner, McCarty, those guys. What sort of your thoughts here?
I'll start with our actual projections. We've got Wrighton at 0.46, Pendrith at 0.39. So we do have Wrighton as slightly better, but we have all these guys like very, very similar in terms of their likelihood of success this week. I think Wrighton and Brennan really kind of fit together in this comparison because they're both young, up-and-coming guys. We don't know a ton about them yet. Certainly we don't have a great sample of them with ShotLink data, but we do know they are very, very good off the tee, and their off the tee strength is what sets up the rest of their game for success, right? Like if you put Brennan in the middle of the fairway in the rough, right next to everybody else in the field, he wouldn't project well. The reason why we like Brennan, the reason why we think he could be a really good play both this week and throughout the season is because what he typically does off the tee, 190 plus ball speed, really accurate off the tee, can work the ball in all types of ways, should be a pretty good win player for that reason. Was very good in the 4 windy rounds that he played in the fall is because he's going to be playing from positions that other guys aren't. He's going to have 130 from the middle of the fairway when others are hitting from 160 out of a fairway bunker. He's going to be hitting a flip wedge when others have a full swing wedge. He's going to be hitting 6-iron into a par 5 when others are being forced to lay up or forced to hit into the green with a 3-wood, things of that nature. So I think Wrighton kind of fits that category as well. Like, he's gaining most of his advantage off the tee. Pendrith has the distance that those two guys have, but he doesn't have the consistent accuracy off the tee that those two guys have. Where Pendrith then separates is he's probably the best putter of the group. So when I look at these three and I remember, okay, but putting and distance are the least predictive things this week, Pendrith seems to me like a bad chalk option and somebody that I will be much more interested in playing when we get to, the Farmers Insurance Open, if he tees it up there, or courses like that, where distance is really rewarded over accuracy and putting is predictive as well.
Yeah. So just in the spirit of time, I'm going to say a couple things quick, and then we can get to sort of what contests we're playing and then the betting breakdown, and we'll get to our lane. We'll probably wrap up in the next 10, 15. But just to note to one other point I want to bring up, especially on a week like this, what people always say, and I trust this is everywhere. It's in our Discord. I'm sure it's in yours. It's, you hear it all around the industry, is like, it'll be the conversation around, okay, well, not all of them can be chalk. It's going to be spread out, which is true. Like, you will see something on Pendrith, something on Wright, and something on McCarty, something on Meisner. It's all going to exist somewhere in there. But one of the things I look for is, like, who are the same guys that they're all the same, but like, who are the same guys in that range that you can just go down to like 7, like just going down for outside of Michael Kim and Gerard, you could have Alex Smalley, Haotong Lee, John Perry, Sahith Theegala. We talked about other guys, Matty Schmid. Sometimes, again, we'd have to see what fits your lane, your model, whatever you're using as your process. But what's prevalent and what's clear is it's about the range. It's not about the golfers. People have already decided on those value golfers as their guys, and what will still be somewhat spread out, they fit perfectly with Connors, with Spawn, with Henley. You see how that starts to form a thing? And it's like, at the end of the day, we're talking about the differences on Morikawa versus Griffin and Henley. And we're talking about Siwoo Kim and Keegan Bradley and JJ Spawn. And we talked about Gotterup versus, Keith Mitchell versus Connors. If those are conversations, there is like 10 to 15 guys down low that you can have that conversation around, whoever you think is the guy. So sometimes it's about the range. And it's, if you looked down there, who are the guys lower than those guys? And then you don't even have to go to the same guys up top. And that's where Alex, I think, was hitting on earlier. If it works out that way and you land on some of the chalkier pieces up top because you just, can't get past it, or you think they're good enough, or if it's a Scotty week, different relevancy, but just noting it, then that makes sense. Because, like, look, I already found guys down low that are huge separators. I'm in a different roster construction, low, under 3% owned, et cetera, et cetera. But on a week like this, if you're like, well, shit, I'm convinced on Morikawa, I like those three guys you mentioned, you could have a different roster construction, all plays under 10%. I know some people think that's too cute. If you play the high stakes, nosebleed stuff like my man Kenny does, probably not the best way to try and just over leverage the entire field. But for the large field stuff, it is not the same as other sports. It's like there's all kinds of weeks where 6 of 6 is 2% or 3%, and any 6 of 6 is a good one. And there might be one guy at 12 to 15% in the lineup, and the rest are all sub 10%. It happens all the time, and it's huge separation to help find your way to the top of these very top-heavy tournaments. Anything else you want to add there? If not, I think we should talk a little bit about what contests we're playing week 1 here.
Yeah, before we get there, I want to put you on the spot and ask you a question. Of all the chalk that we discussed, who is the guy that you think you're most likely to play?
Connors.
Me too.
Yeah, I would look to get different with it. Like I said, I would look like when people are looking to pivot, but the most likely to play just based on price, ups, again, just probably not going to hurt you. And because he's even lower price than the other two, he fits different builds. I have tons of different ways I can build with him and around him than I need to go off of him. He makes the most sense to me there.
Yeah, my thoughts on Connors, the reason why he's also the chalk I'm most likely to play is because, number one, he like Spawn and Henley, honestly, like he very clearly projects above the players he's around. So I'm not questioning that. He's a phenomenal wind player, so I like that. And it's also really easy to play him with some of his potential pivots. Like Kitayama and Chris Kirk, for example, have really good GPP scores. We talked about Jordan Spieth. You can very easily play at least 3 of those 4 guys and have, no salary constraint concerns whatsoever after you put that group into your lineup. So I really like that because, as we know, people like to either play chalk or they like to play the pivots. They don't like to put chalk with pivots together. That's something that we've really, really seen from contest sims. So that kind of, so like Connors plus Kitayama will be less owned as a combination than what you would expect just given their ownership projection. So that sort of thing is something I'm always on the lookout for. And I think we can really easily accomplish it this week with Connors.
That's what I tried to bring up earlier too, like the Goddard up example. It could be Adam Scott for you, whatever you guys think. My point was more people look at it and go, well, if I'm already here, and I know this because people hand build, we're talking about single entry for, on purpose. So many of the shows out there already exist around MME. There's tons of principles, I think at least, that you can take from this show and apply. And this is week 1, episode 1, Sony Open. Like, we're going to be around all season long. But the note being, like, when you look at that and you're sitting in front of you, and I know everybody does, they sit on their phone, they're like, okay, I got this, I got this, I got this. Well, I just heard him say, like, I heard all these sites say Connors is chalk. I'm going to move off him. They turn Connors into someone else way more often than you say, what if I add to slice and dice? I talk about it all the time. You get a running back that's going to be popular. Sometimes it's the defense that pushes up the ownership on the running back to make the combo even more popular. But other times, like, everyone's on James Cook, but nobody's playing the Buffalo defense, or nobody's playing a run back to sort of force him to do it. There's secondary stacks and ways you can do it where you can sort of slice and dice into that ownership in a way that still makes sense. If Connors is the chalk that we believe makes the most sense for all those reasons we just listed, and we're good with it, why not look to do it in a different way to separate you so that, again, if you're in the middle of the room or the back of the room, in my analogy from earlier, and you're with the Connors people, all us nice Canadians, as my friend Nick Mars likes to say here, Marcy, he says, I'd pick this guy because he's Canadian, but that's my point. If you do that, you might be in the middle of the room from them, but if Goddard up goes off and they say, oh, damn, I could have just played Goddard up instead, and the answer is actually needed to play both, you just zoomed to the front of the room and got ahead of them that way. So little things like that, I think, are important to remember. This guy didn't even want to hear the Canadian talks. Bring up Canada, he's out, man, just gone.
I don't even know what happened. I'm glad I went back to the window. I wouldn't have even known that I had been disconnected.
Do not forget a Canadian won last year. Nick Taylor. Nick Taylor's the man too. He's 9K this week. He's actually somewhat interesting as well. I guess I should note again. We'll see if people end up going there with Harry Hall and some other stuff around. Again, can't bring it all up, but I think there's definitely some interesting options to go with here to get different. What contests are you playing this week? I brought it up earlier. I'm definitely playing the $200 single entry to kick things off. It's a nice structure. I feel really good about this week, which we'll get to our lane in a bit here, but I'm definitely going to be going in the $200 single entry this week for this.
Yeah, I think I will too. One interesting thing is my favorite single entry is the $200 with 277 people. It doesn't look like they have that this week. The $200 has 555. It's still really top heavy, 20,000 to first instead of 10,000 to first. So if anything, that will make me lean towards an even more contrarian single entry lineup than I usually do. I also think that, like, even though I very, very rarely don't play single entry, every single week I am looking at the player pool and what my potential player pool looks like. And I am asking myself, like, is this a week where maybe I should do 3 lineups or 4 lineups where maybe there's, maybe there are 3 players that I know I want locked into my lineup, but then beyond that, it's really kind of, just shrug and hope. And then, okay, maybe I want to do 3 different combinations of this, core and just vary around that. I don't see that this week. I do think I'm going to, just find something I really like. And so I'll probably play single entry. I very much like that $200. I also like, I think you can throw just one lineup into the $250 with 266 people. That one has 16.7% first. So that's very similar to the $277 single that I usually play. Same amount goes to first place, but it does cost an extra $50 to get into. And then from a qualifier standpoint, it doesn't look like we have any megas available just yet, but there is a $98 300-person world championship qualifier that I will probably do as the substitute for those usual satellites that I do.
Which one is that?
$5 million. Oh wait, did I click the wrong thing?
The FFW. Are you gonna play the FFWC, the big one?
Yeah, FGWC round 1 contest ticket.
I said FF. Yeah, FGWC. Sorry, it's starting this week. Yeah.
Yeah.
$438, right?
Yeah, so that's one ticket. Only that's 300 entrants for one ticket, $98 to join. It's harder to do that. If I had a larger bankroll, then I'd probably do the $438 one for 67. With 67 entrants, that's usually the size of satellite that I go to. It's like the $70 or the $75 for the megas is usually 67 people.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're gonna. As you guys can probably tell, we're gonna try to do this kind of conversation more often here on Leverage Lane, where we're kind of talking through what we're gonna do and using that as an example to help you guys. And obviously that means like if you have less of a bankroll, okay, figure out how to do what we're doing at just a scaled down version.
Yes.
I think a big point there is like if you look at the satellites and qualifiers right now, you see a bunch of $3 and $1 satellites to get into the $10 milli. That is not the kind of thing that I want to do, because the milli is not the kind of contest that I usually play, right? So I want the top heavy but smaller single entries. And I will, so like even when I get into the mega, it's not single entry, but the mega this past week for the wild card weekend was 567 people. I'd much rather compete against 567 people than against 300,000 or however many are going to be in this $10 milli. So I always, this is something I've talked about a lot recently in my Discord as well. It's like when you're looking at the satellites that you're joining, you should be trying to get into contests that you feel like you still have a really large and attainable edge in. You might have a large edge in that $10 milli, but how attainable is that edge when the edge means you have to beat 300,000 other people to actually, realize that edge? It's a lot harder to do that. So with your satellite play, try and get into contests that you actually want to play. And, if you had a larger bankroll, you would be entering yourself.
Yeah, I was just trying to find it. There's a $33 single entry this week that I think a lot of people would look at. It's 106 people. It pays like $500 for first, et cetera, et cetera. It's pretty solid, but like sometimes you can find a way. And you talked about this during the season for football. I was just trying to find it. I can't find it now. But anyway, like if you sometimes have a setup where you're like, you know what, I really like this lineup, but I found this 2v2 and this 2v2, you playing 3 lineups as opposed to 1 doesn't have to mean playing more money. You can actually play less. Like someone who plays $100 single entry might be able to find a $20 3 max and then use the additional money for something else or whatever, or picking and, I'm going to pick this one as my $33 single entry, but I'm going to play the $20 3 max. That one that I think is my best will be duplicated. I still come in at less than $100. You might play for a little less, but you'll cover yourself and you're almost playing. You talked about this super well during the NFL season of playing a 3 max like a single entry. It's like, look, I'm pretty clean on these spots. I'm just moving a few pieces, but I do want to cover my ass or cover a couple angles to say I'm going to do it this way. And it's not actually play. I just saved you money. I always say it this way, but it saves you enough money to buy a milkshake to drown your sorrows if you were completely wrong anyway. You would have lost $100. Now you lose the 93, but you have $7 left over for a milkshake. So inflation, people, it costs $7 these days. But go ahead.
Yeah, I think a really good example of this was 2 years ago at Craig Ranch. It was one of those weeks where I did 3 entry. I want to say it was Thigala, Minwoo Lee, and Jake Knapp. Maybe Keith Mitchell, Jake Knapp, and Minwoo Lee or something like that. But I had 3 players at the top end. They were like the only 3 positive GPP scores. I locked those 3 guys into all 3 lineups. And then I had 3 different combinations of the 3 value plays. The lineup that did the best, that got a takedown that week, had Sunghyun Kim, and Sunghyun Kim was popping as like one of our course fit specialists that week. It was distance and around the green play that mattered. The rest of his game was atrocious, but they didn't matter as much in the course fit model. But I said, like, I very, very much see like a clear edge this week from playing this combination of Minwoo, Jake Knapp, Keith Mitchell, whichever 3 it was. I'm confident that Mitchell and Knapp were in there. I don't want that to be ruined by a guy like Sunghyun Kim, who obviously is a much lower probability play than those guys. So I'm just going to play 3 different lineups as if I'm playing a single entry, but I get like a do-over with the value plays in case one of them really screws up. And yeah, it worked out really well that week because Sunghyun actually played really well, finished with a streak like on 15, 16, 17 or something like that. And brought me all the way to the top that week. But yeah, it's as you say, like playing a single entry or playing 3 entry like a single entry, just because you're really building around a specific core and then deviating around that.
Yeah, and it's important to note because, like, again, we talked about earlier with medium projection. This show could go on forever. We're not going to do that today. We're going to kind of wrap this thing up. We'll get your main betting breakdown piece for this week will be a little bit shorter than usual because we had the extra time at the start to tell everybody what the show is all about. But just noting it, I know people look at like their optimizer too, or like they look at projections and say, man, I'm down to this 2v2. It's like a couple points apart. But if you're that strongly about that 2v2, you should just play both and figure it out because of the median projection. If one of those is a 4-6 and one of them is a 6-6, your 3 points that you're seeing on your screen now becomes 100 points or more in some cases, depending on the weeks. Could be 50, could be 80, could be 100 plus. My point being, those 2v2s matter. It's not like football where you're like, damn, I went this way and got 15. The other way would have got me 27. Like, yeah, it's still very significant. I'm not saying it's not. I'm saying you're talking about potentially 100 points on your lineup in something like this decision. So yeah, think about your stuff when it comes to contest selection, all of that. Don't be afraid to shift your money around. It doesn't mean to play more or pay more. It means just to play a more sound game and think about that type of stuff before you go in. So let's go to the betting breakdown. I know you have a ton more stuff you do in your Discord. People talked about that. They can join that for sure. But what did you have for this week specifically you wanted to hit on?
I don't have any outrights selected yet. I have a few I'm looking at, and I'm kind of like looking for an extra reason to actually play it because I'm showing value in the actual market, but it doesn't quite reach the threshold that I typically like to find to actually place an outright. Matt McCarty and Billy Horschel are the two that I think I'm most likely to play. Sahith Theegala is also an interesting one. We have him at 1.2%, Horschel 1.6%, and McCarty 1.9%. I think McCarty's probably the one I'm most likely to play because I very much believe there's something to the idea that there is a skill of knowing how to win and being able to get it done. And we can't look at a player who hasn't won, like Theegala, for example, and say that he doesn't have that skill, or at least he never will have that skill. We can look at a player who's shown us that he can win a bunch and say that guy definitely has it. And the reason for that is it's always really hard to win golf tournaments. And let's say you're tied for the lead going into the last day, you still might only have a 20% chance to win. So when you don't win, when you had a 20% chance, that doesn't tell us as much as winning when you had a 20% chance tells us about your ability to get it done under pressure. So the fact that McCarty already has multiple wins and is projecting this well tells me that maybe we should go McCarty as that outright. And then on the pick'em side of things, my favorite type of pick and play is probably unique for most because it's not the most fun thing to bet, but it is profitable. And that is betting on guys to finish worse than their finishing position. And before I even give out a play here, I want to talk just for a moment about why this is advantageous. And it kind of gets at the idea of what I do in NBA. So in NBA, my favorite types of props to go after are free throws made, offensive rebounds, and turnovers. And these 3 types of props are very rarely, if ever, offered by actual sports books. And what this means is that underdog has to originate those lines themselves, which makes them more likely to make a mistake and post a bad line that we can take advantage of. In golf, with these finishing positions, it's not that sportsbooks don't offer finishing positions, but sportsbooks are only offering one direction of the finishing position. You can't bet on Colin Morikawa to finish outside the top 20 on most, if not all, sportsbooks. Most of the time, you can only bet him to finish inside the top 20, which means the sportsbook numbers are juiced like crazy. And so his implied odds don't actually line up with his real odds. His implied odds are a lot higher of a top 20 finish than what he's actually likely to do. And so over on Underdog, if they are just following those sportsbook odds and using those implied to then create a two-way market where you can bet on better or worse, or pick better or worse than 20.5 finishing position, obviously the worse is going to be the more mathematically sound side. And so it's something I had a ton of success with last season. As the season went on, they kind of got the hang of it. You know, I won a lot early in the season, and then it became harder and harder as the season went on to actually find really advantageous lines. We have three that our model at FTN really likes this week. Morikawa and Keegan are two of those three. I'm not as sold on those, though, for two reasons. Number one, historically, they both have really solid top 20 rates. And number two, they're both really good wind players, which our model is not picking up on. So the one guy that I do really like is Siwoo Kim, worst 20.5 finishing position. He only finished in the top 20 in 11 of 30 events last year. He's simming to finish outside of the top 20 60% of the time in our model over at FTN. And he's a decent wind player, but pretty much just like the same guy in the wind as he is outside of the wind. So there's nothing our model is missing there. So Siwoo Kim, worse than 20.5 finishing position, is probably going to be the pick that I build around with my PGA plays this week.
I love it. All right, let's focus on the leverage lane. We'll get to the final part of the show here and then get out of here. But like I said, moving forward, we will have a bigger section and segment on that stuff as well. So I'll let you kick it off first if you want. And I guess maybe I'll do mine because I think it's going to coincide. So I may as well just say it first so I have it. Apologies. Choking over here. But I will say this. My one I was excited about. I told you as soon as we get on, I was like a kidney candy shop just going through this stuff. My guy this week's going to be Bobby Mack. And it's not just about playing Bobby Mack. It's a lot of factors that go with it. But he's probably going to be like a secondary chalk piece, actually. But it's all about how you play him. And my take is, no matter what, he's blocked a little bit by JJ Spawn. People are still going to want Spawn there in different types of builds. Secondly, it's if I play when I play Bobby Mack, which I am going to, so I'm telling you, I'm either going to play him as the starting point or second to Morikawa. And the reason I say that is because that still leaves Henley, Griffin, Spawn out of this. So it really doesn't matter how I look at it. I think, him getting ready for the start of the season, like you said, I know the best ball stuff. I'm not even in the best ball streets. So that tells you what you need to know there. It's not why. I know a lot of people like the fact that he might play a lot more, but I think we saw, a lot with him in the past now, what he's capable of. I think this course can fit him. And I think from my perspective of just right out of the gates, taking that uncertainty on of like, yeah, he'll be somewhat owned, but because you have the blocker with Spawn and the guys above him in Griffin and Henley and other factors, I can either start my builds with him or I could have him second to Morikawa to get a really different start. And then it also puts you in a very unique place in your roster construction where you don't have to land on the same value plays as everybody else, depending on how you build it out from there. What do you got?
Yeah, I'm very similar. I'm going to make Keegan Bradley my leverage lane, and I'm probably starting the lineup with him. I think there's just a really good opportunity to build really strong balanced lineups this week. And it's because I think there's a group in the 8Ks, Spieth, Goddard, Kirk, Mitchell, Kitayama, along with Connors, that really aren't that far behind in win equity, in top 20 equity, in top 10 equity to the guys at the top of the board who are getting so much ownership. And if you start there, now your worst player is going to be a lot better than the worst player in the lineups that go to these expensive guys. So I really like that build. And then you're also getting significantly less ownership. So I think like if you build balanced lineups, you're kind of getting the better end of the deal in terms of just like overall win probability and made cut 6 for 6 probability. And you're doing so at much lower ownership. So very clear way to build, I think, this week. And Keegan is the most expensive player with a positive GPP score for us over at FTN. So I love that. But it's also just like he's a really valuable DFS guy because when he plays well, he can beat any field. And so it's, I love the ceiling. I love the win equity from him, but then also you get the boost of this guy's an outstanding win player. He's very clearly the best win player of anybody 9,000 and above. So kind of get all factors here. He just strikes me as the most underowned play in the field. I think a lot of people honestly are a little bit afraid of the fact that, hey, I don't know how he's going to respond all season to the Ryder Cup. The Ryder Cup took a lot out of him. Maybe it broke him to some degree. That is a possibility. And honestly, I went into this season thinking I probably want to see that Keegan is still Keegan before I start playing him. But this ownership at this price with these win splits, it's just too good to pass up. So Keegan's my leverage lane.
I love that statement too, because it's like the cliche saying of like, I'll pay to find out. I love that one. It's like, you're going to pay to find out. It's like, because everything else is priced in. It's like the ownership is there for you. It's a lot of talk. Like his gameplay is his gameplay. How he comes out and handles it, we'll see. But love that call out from you. One thing I can certainly say is that if Bobby Mack has a bad week, I don't think it will because his average latitude was much higher than his Oahu latitude in Hawaii, but definitely not worried about that or stats that I'm taking into consideration. I don't know what the sample would be on it, but he can have a bad week for certain. It's all about what you see, how you want to build and go about your stuff, but that's why it's called your leverage lane. Find the lane, stick to it, make it happen. We'll be back every week here.
One last thing, Tambo. On that point with Bobby Mack, it is worth noting, being from Scotland, he's used to wind. So we haven't seen like the great wind splits, but theoretically he should be well suited for the win they're going to see this week. So that can work both ways here.
It really could. And he did add that. So I should shout him out for that part. Obviously, a ton of different people helping out with the chat and engagement and putting questions there. And, on the first show, we want to make sure we covered a lot of what the season's going to look like and sets up for. Let us know in the comments. We're well open to feedback and anything you liked, hated, want more of, etc. Leave that in the comments after this live show ends. If you're watching it on playback, you can go right down immediately, hit the comments. While you're there doing that, please tap that thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you keep getting this show for free with all the notifications. Alex, let the people know where they can find you, and then we'll get out of here.
Yeah, find me on Twitter at Alex Blickle 1. Whether you want the GPP scores and ownership over at FTN Fantasy, or you want to get into my Discord for Pick'em, Advanced DFS Theory, or the outrights, you can find all of it through my Twitter. So that's the easiest place to go.
Yeah, and again, if you guys want to go over, Ship It Nation really does have all the offerings, but I know there's other sites out there, $5.99 for projections ownership. Then you got to add an optimizer. There's other sites, $300, but that are partnered with SaberSim that don't even have the SaberSim available in that package. So for $349, expires today and then goes just up to $399, but you can get everything included. If you want to add on the Rick Run Good tools, we did partner with him yesterday. This is for Ship It Nation members only to be able to get this bundle. That's $549. Again, a lot of competitors, $599. That's just projections and ownership. We've got all that. The Stone, boots on the ground with Gannon. This gets you SaberSim Optimizer, 150 lineups with SaberScore, and then the Rick Run Good tools. This also expires today, goes to $599 tomorrow. So if you need it, hit us up. If you don't know what I'm talking about and you have questions, hit me up, tambo@shipitnation.com or info@shipitnation.com. This was a lot of fun, Alex. I'm excited to be doing this every week with you, my man. I think this is a good starting first show. That's going to do it for this one, guys. For Alex and for myself, ToeTagginTambo, let's ship it.